master and giving him what for. And I thought, oh yeah, this is good. This is about what we need. And I expected the character to develop from that point onwards. I think Caves was perfectly acceptable because she was sick. So I was playing ill for most of that episode, and I liked the sort of strong Beauty and the Beast sort of aspect that was in that, and I thought it was well filmed by Graham. But I think by the time I got into my second season, they just so harped on about the bickering between the two of us and the sort of language thing, and then the stories popped up like Time Lash, and they seemed to completely forget where the original character had come from. I was much, much happier with Trial, because at least they then accepted that time had passed and the relationship had to change, because the way that the Doctor and Peri were going on, they would have killed each other. Yeah. Or she'd have just said, oh, for God's sake, let me out here. You know, or he'd have said, get out, you know. I mean, it would have ended, because there was no reason for the two of them to stay together. There has to be some kind of amicable reason for being together, and somehow that seemed to get lost somewhere in the middle of the second season as well. So I was much happier with Trial, but I would have taken it in a different direction if I had been completely in the driving seat of where Peri would have gone.
And the Bill Baggs stories, the character in that this round?
Is perhaps a little nearer to what I would do, definitely. Especially in the second story. I mean, she's more intelligent, and it's not a case of she's actually dealing with situations herself, and using the Doctor, I think, in the right capacity in the things that he has more experience in. You know, going to help for him to help in situations that are just beyond or any other human beings
well,
capacity.
More involved.
Yeah, exactly. And the story that we're filming at the moment, I think, is incredibly interesting, and I cannot reveal why it's incredibly interesting.
It was a relationship thing, right?
But the relationship is very interesting in this story, because it really gives us a chance to form something new.
Yes.
You mentioned before in the stage production, this is actually for both of you, that you did some script changes. Did you have that power at all during Doctor Who? Sort of you as a doctor saying that this really wouldn't fit my character too well, or you as a companion saying, I don't think she would really say this?
Should we say this together?
No.
No.
I think I got like 3 words changed. I got mincer changed to meat grinder. I remember that was a long saga. That took me 3 weeks. In that, you know, I would say, I'm sorry, but you don't say this in the States, and you don't say, I feel like I've been through the mincer, Doctor. No, it's meat grinder. I mean, they were saying, but nobody in England will know what the meat grinder is. I said, well, then cut the line, say something else. But use the proper word, yeah. And it was like the whole thing about, can I please say cop? No, you must say policeman. But I'm American. No, say policeman. You know, all of that stuff that I was supposed to have control over changing was not as strong as I had been led to believe when I began. And then there were things like we would say, I'm sorry, we can't say this because 4 stories ago we established that I never knew this. So when he says to me, Peri, you know, shut the TARDIS door, I can't do it if I've never established that I know where it is, or whatever the particular situation was. And most of the time those were listened to, but they were just minuscule things. If we wanted
always regarded as being irritating.
Yes, how annoying of you to remember that. How annoying of you to know that your character shouldn't know that. It would have been a lot simpler if it had just been made, and at least that's what they thought at the time. Because it's such a long process to go back. It comes up in the rehearsal room. Normally we would say to each other first, how come I'm saying that? And we'd agree on it, because it did help to be a duo. And we would mention it to the director, who would be standing next to, you know, the personal assistant, who would probably then rush off and get on the phone, who would ring John Nathan Turner and Eric, who would then ring the writer, and by the time it got to the writer, the reason for why you probably wanted to change it had like
been through 3 or
it's
4
Chinese
people.
whispers, and sort of like probably the whole.
So they'd be irritated if you were being picky about something they didn't understand.
Yeah.
You were never allowed to ring the writer direct. Oh, it was just a pain in the neck, really.
Yeah, ridiculous long chain, and it finally got back to you, and the answer was usually no, and then you go, well, what am I supposed to do then? You know, and it would just go back and forth. So.
And it ends up with
Ridiculous.
just being the actors being irritating.
Yeah.
I remember once at the beginning of the trial, being whipped into that court by that beat thing, whatever it was, and finding myself on trial. And I said to Eric Saywood, I said, the last time that we met the Time Lords, the Doctor was the President of Gallifrey, wasn't he? And he said, was he? Yes, I remember Peter being made President after it was 5 Doctors.
Yeah.
He said, so? I said, well, all he has to say is, I'm the President of Gallifrey, sod off, all of you. And so he said, well, we'll put a line in to make you happy. So he put a line in saying, I'm the President, no you're not, you've been deposed, and that was the end of that. But at least they did take on board the fact that it shouldn't be an actor who, I mean, I only happened by chance, I knew very little about the history of the programme. There should have been more kind of thought going into it, I thought. The only lines I ever, I didn't often get lines changed, but I did put lines in. Most of those puns, I'm afraid, were mine, the Perrier and things like that. It was agreed that my Doctor would be allowed to make awful puns, so if I thought of them and they were accepted by the author, who couldn't give a hoot. And lines like calling, my favourite one was when I got to call Paul Darrow a microcephalic apostate. That was one of mine as well. And he didn't know what it meant, so that was all right.
Or just when you were about to give your name in the first episode of Trial, you're just about, I should write a doctorate about that, and Peri interrupts you just before you say your name.
That's right. That was mine as well.
The only thing I did get put in was something that came up at the BBC canteen at one point, and we were talking about the budget for the show and something like that, and John Nicola Turner said that one of the things they got a lot of letters about was the fact that it was very obvious that we built 2 corridors and that we were seen in the same corridors going back and forth, or 2 sewers, or 2 this. And I said, well, why don't you just stick a line in about it? And he said, well, like what? And I said, well, if every time you go somewhere, the companion says, God, Doctor, all these halls look the same to me, you know, all these swimming pools, all these tunnels, all these sewers. If somewhere, and it's in every episode, you just sort of like, I think sort of, it'll be just sort of like coming into a scene, you hear Peri going, oh God, all these so-and-so's like this, you know. And then that way, every time, you know, somebody sort of says, well, all the corridors look the same. Well, you're absolutely right, they did. It was part of the story. That's why they got lost. It was the only thing I think I ever sort of really got to put in. It was my own sort of personal gag.
So you also got very little input into your costumes, I gather, as well?
No, Nicola chose hers.
Yeah, I did.
That was a major
Madonna
bugbear.
copied me years later. But, you know. Yeah, what a way to get pneumonia. I was very happy in my first costume, actually. It was very sensible. Somebody's through. Because I actually got to wear flat, comfortable espadrilles, and I was in cotton clothing and all of that. And it was just the fact that the press made such a big to-do about, you know, Doctor Who girl in a bikini, blah, 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 and all this great big centre spread in the Daily Star. I think John Nicola Turner suddenly thought, because of the ratings, suddenly shut up. Oh, I've got something good here, we'll leave her in a bikini for the rest of the season. And I didn't get dressed again, really, for the Caves of Androzani, which was utterly ludicrous, because there we were filming in Lanzarote in October, which was like mid to late 70s, upper 70s. And then in November, we're feeling the sort of, we're filming the next series, and I've got a slight sort of little bit of cotton they've thrown in extra under the shirt. And we're talking it's, I don't know, -2 or 3. Peter's in like 2 layers of thermals, and so he's dying. I caught pneumonia and I got frostbite. And the cameraman frequently said, would you slap that girl, she's gone blue? And I was going, I'm so sorry, you know, and it was horrendous and ridiculous. And I wasn't happy running around in shorts and leotard, because that was also a total, it had nothing to do with the character that I started out with. I mean, I imagined sneakers and jeans and sweatshirts, t-shirts, you know.
Sophie seems to have done pretty well, and she wears quite a bit of clothing as
Yeah.
I mean, like the
Yeah.
bomber jacket for one is very recognizable. That would have been pretty common
Yeah.
before.
Well, I think also that we went through a sudden fashion change as well. Suddenly we went in for this much more sort of masculine dressing for women. I mean, and although I'm wearing myself now shorts and all of that, but people